When you step into a group and you are vulnerable and the person across from you goes, man, I get it. That sucks. I'm so sorry. Like, I've been there. My husband's done that. I've been in that behavior before as a man. Like, there is something healing about seeing the grace that you receive from another individual that you don't get when you're not open with others.
Kris, you said it again.
What did I say?
You said mic drop.
Well, that's because we have so many good quotes in every episode. I can't help it.
You're right. You're right. You're right. I mean, I can't argue with that. I'm really excited for today's podcast. I think we say that every single time. Maybe we just really like what we do. I don't know.
I think you're onto something there.
Today's podcast, we have Jeremy Waldridge. He is the director or executive director at Pure Life Alliance. He's a man that I admire greatly. He has been through the process, and I have a great respect for not only where he's come from and what he's been through, but what he has done as a result following what he described it as, Kris. What was it? Drop day?
Yeah.
Drop dead
yeah.
versus Discovery Day. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some feedback as to how others resonate with this podcast today.
Mm-hmm. And I love that he went into describing not only kind of some of the recovery process for he and his wife, and some of the mindsets they had and advice they were given that he shares with the listeners, but he also describes what the Pure Life Alliance process is. And one thing I really appreciate, there's so many great ministries out there that help with the betrayed spouse and the struggling spouse. But one thing that sets Pure Life Alliance apart is that they have ongoing groups. So if a woman calls in, they're set up with a mentor who's going to take her through a one-on-one individual mentoring process. In addition to that, there's a group that a woman can walk into at any time, and the doors are always open, and that's just beautiful. So there's always someone there. There's always women to go talk to, and always someone to surround you and uplift you. And we as women get to be a part of that process of helping others and making our message too.
So good. So with that, friends, enjoy today's podcast with Jeremy Waldridge from Pure Life Alliance. Today, our guest is Jeremy Waldridge. He is the executive director at Pure Life Alliance, and he is going to share with us not only a little bit about the organization itself, but also about his recovery with his wife and where they are today.
Welcome to the show, Jeremy. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Would you just introduce yourself to the guests, please?
Yes, thank you guys for having me. I'm glad to be here and talking with your audience. My name is, as you mentioned, Jeremy Waldridge. I've been the executive director at Pure Life Alliance since 2020. Great year. But I've actually been involved in the ministry since 2009. So it's a ministry that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, Jeremy, it's men like you that have actually walked with people like my husband. And we know that it's not our job to fix our spouse or to make him walk his healing path, but it's resources like you and organizations that you run that really bring a lot of hope to so many of that. So I am really glad that you're here today to shed some light on your own story and how that may bring hope and healing to other people's stories as well.
Jeremy, you and your wife have a recovery story in your journey of unwanted sexual behavior. And after Discovery Day, how long did it take you to get to the place where you earned her trust and safety? And how did you go about doing that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I wouldn't say we had a typical Discovery Day. I was caught multiple times early on in my journey, early on in our marriage. And like a lot of guys, my response was very much, it's not really a big deal. I'll take care of it. We'll get over there. It's not a problem. I even went to a support group for a while and came up with a what I would say legitimate excuse. And for those who were listening, I had air quotes around that because it really wasn't legitimate at all, for why I needed to leave my support group because it just wasn't meeting my needs. Um, and so it wasn't until my sin, my behavior, my unwanted sexual actions became very public that I had to do something about it. And so that, I guess, would be considered the official discovery day, while my wife knew about it for a long time and had been struggling with my behaviors and to the point I didn't realize, but to the point of ready to call it quits. Um, but that day, that time is when it kind of hit me with a ton of bricks. That was my rock bottom moment where I realized something needed to change, and that's when I started making changes. But your question was, how long did it take for us to kind of move back into a better relationship? And the reality is, it took a long time after that day. My wife, when she shares our story, she'll say that I was doing everything that I was supposed to, and yet she still was cold to me. And that it took a miracle. It took God relighting that flame for her to rebuild that intimacy with me. And for us, it took probably about 2 years after my drop dead moment before we were even to be able to talk about what does it look like to be emotionally and physically intimate.
Interesting. You just said drop dead moment. And so it's interesting that, the women maybe experience a discovery day or D Day, and you guys have a D Day too, which is your kind of drop dead day. Your, yeah, kind of come to Jesus moment that things need to change. Yeah.
And they don't always align, which is unfortunate. Oftentimes, the discovery for a wife happens long before the guy has realized, yeah, something needs to change, which is unfortunate.
Unfortunate, but also encouraging, I think, to hear that that's kind of more the norm than it happened in unison, and both people going at their recovery and with the same energy and ferociousness. So,
Essentially, yeah, we've entered two different realities. He's got the relief of not having to hide a secret, and she's got the burden of the secrets that have just been unloaded. So they're literally living in two different realities. So I appreciate that we have a new definition of D-Day, Discovery Day or Drop Dead Day.
Yeah.
That's really good. So Jeremy, how did you both address triggers and insecurities that took place during your recovery process? It's kind of a big question, but generally speaking, how did you address those in that process?
Yeah. Early on, we sought both. I got help at a group, but we also sought counseling. And it was really interesting in counseling. I'd go in with my agenda of the things that my wife needs to fix because they're what's causing these triggers. And she would go in with the things that I would need to fix because I'm causing all these problems. And what we found out as we went through counseling, oftentimes the opposites were true. The things that I thought were triggers that she needed to fix were things I needed to fix in me, and vice versa. And so it became very clear that the things that were drudging stuff up had more to do with ourselves than it did with the other individual. And that was very helpful. The other thing is my wife, she picked up on it. She was much healthier than I was, and she picked up on a lot of that quicker than I did. So even when we have arguments or aspects where we needed to change how we were discussing it, she would make that change quicker, which would first make me feel like an idiot because why am I not making that change quicker? Like, how come she's doing this better than me? But it would also help me make that change. And that's not her job, but just the action of her making the change allowed for me to make the change.
did you have any specific, oh gosh, your wife was triggered, so something she did to handle the trigger, or any specific tools or?
Well, I don't know how much in this podcast you've brought up your skill set with Enneagrams, but I'll give an Enneagram example.
Do it.
My wife is a 9, and so her normal reaction would be to step back, to not engage. And I, being the very talented addict that I was, would utilize that. And so if I felt threatened or felt like I was being challenged, I would roar up because I knew she would step back. And so one of the first things she did and she learned, and I jokingly say our pastor taught her how to cuss because he said it's a time where you just need to be able to cuss. But she learned the ability to not step back, but to step in, which
Mm,
then would challenge my behavior, not just my inappropriate, unwanted sexual behavior, but my anger or my roaring up to try to cause a change in her.
okay. Thank you. What role did individual growth and self improvement play in revitalizing your relationship, Jeremy? And how did you support each other's personal development? Like you're doing your own work individually, but were you guys able to come alongside each other in your growth as well?
Yeah, so I think for me, our support group, being in a Pure Life Alliance Set Free group, was super helpful for me because not only was I going there and getting to be around guys who experienced some of the same struggles that I did, I was also able to learn from the books that we were doing, understanding what's going on in my brain, understanding what's going on with my thought process, understanding why I make some of the choices I make, thinking about my past, how did that affect my current future. So that's kind of my growth journey. But what was really powerful, and I think a lot of guys they miss out on this, is being able to bring that home and just have those conversations with my wife. Hey, this is kind of what I learned in group today, and it gave her something tangible to hold on to rather than this is just some crazy pervert over here doing weird stuff. It was more of a, oh, okay, this is what's leading to this. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but I at least can understand how he got from A to B. And now we can address B because we know how he got there.
Awesome.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to where you guys are today in relationship to your wife. And I don't mean like literally today. Maybe you could literally share today. I don't know.
Yeah.
But just in general, where are you today in relationship to her? And more importantly, this is an area where I've struggled. So I will ask you, being the authority on the subject for today, how do you demonstrate your commitment to not reverting back to old behavior? Because so many times we hear, I swear I am committed. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then many of us experience as wives that phase will last 2 weeks, 2 months, or something like that, and then that old behavior and patterns start to kind of come back in. So where are you guys today, and how do you demonstrate your commitment to not reverting back?
Mm. So where are we today? I often tell people when I share my story that we are in a better place than we ever were before. We spend a lot more time together, and the time is much more. I don't know. It's much more in depth. I don't know. Is that's the best way to see it to say it is it's our conversations have depth. Our we can sit and watch a show and it has depth. I mean, it's just weird that there is a level of connection there, and I think that's some of that recognizing that intimacy is more than just a sexual thing, but there is so much other layers to intimacy, and so I would say that. I mean, that's good. Even in how we fight, like when we argue, there's depth there. One of us is stepping in that depth. Just kidding. But the reality is when we argue, we're able to come back together in a quicker manner. We're able to address the real issue rather than talking about the subtext of issues that have gone by.
And all this
So
is
that's
different than behavior you had before.
oh yeah, because anytime there was an argument, I'd roar up, she'd go
Oh,
away, and then the argument's over,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we were never addressing things,
yeah.
and even in the midst, even early on when we were starting to address things, it would take weeks to really kind of recognize, or we'd be arguing about things that weren't actually the real issue. So I think that's something that is much different today than you would say 5 years ago. And then in relationship to your question on how I can share with her um, my journey today, how I'm not going to relapse or have issues like that. One thing we tell the ladies in our Hidden Heart group, it's probably the most important mantra. We tell the guys, we tell the ladies this as well, is believe the behavior. It doesn't really matter what I say. But if my wife sees that I'm staying up later, not coming to bed with her, if my wife sees that I'm getting angry quicker, those are trigger points for her. And so she should be asking me at that point, what's going on? Is there something going on? And sometimes there is something. Sometimes there's other issues that lead to those behaviors that need to be addressed. But the reality is, I can share with my wife, these are the things that I'm doing today that I wasn't doing 10 years ago. These are the steps that I'm taking.
That that is a really fantastic point. I think a lot of what I hear when I watch couples heal, and what I don't hear is sometimes the husband will share how he got to where he is, so she has a gauge as far as behavior goes that are sort of like you said, those red flags, and so sometimes a husband will do that, but a lot of times husbands don't necessarily do that. So she's only relying on her trauma experience, which is also very valid, because she knows patterns and whatnot that she sees. But something I've also found very helpful is exactly what you just said. You said, I told her, that these are some of the things to look for. And boy, if that doesn't scream healing together, I don't know what is. So now she's got her set of tools as far as what she's experienced, looking at behavior changing. And now you've given her an extra set of tools also saying, when I do this, this, and this, it's probably a good time, to check in. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
It sounds like your bride learned how to take up her territory or take up her space. And I can relate with that. As an Enneagram 7, I throw confetti on everything. I have a hard time living in the present. And I can identify with you and your wife, Jeremy, because my husband and I were walking on eggshells a lot. We were absolutely avoiding conflict at all costs. And because of those behaviors or those coping mechanisms that we had adopted to keep peace between us and in the home, it was a false peace, and we weren't being authentic, and we kind of had more of a shallow relationship. It was good, but it wasn't real, in so many ways. And what betrayal trauma did for us was it taught us how to step into that territory, step into the space, speak the truth, identify our needs, speak our needs. And now as a result, we have emotional intimacy, which, as you were mentioning, leads to physical intimacy. That's beautiful and wonderful and whole. So yeah, it's a great blessing. God does not waste our pain, does he?
No, no, and I know you guys are gonna have Jake Porter on one of these days, but I'll tell you that he did a training recently on.
I think it was attachment styles, wasn't it?
Thank you,
You're
attachment styles.
welcome.
Yeah, I was just right out of the tip of my tongue. Yeah, attachment styles, and just understanding that the rupture actually isn't the issue, it's the repair. And so if we are going to be in relationship with people, there's going to be rupture. That's going to happen. And so how do we do the repair well? And I just really appreciated that.
Yeah, that is a great takeaway. In fact, I'm writing that quote down. So, can you provide? Okay, let's get into Pure Life Alliance. As the listeners know, this podcast is supported with the help of Pure Life Alliance, and we're excited about Pure Life Alliance. So, tell us about this ministry. What did it do for you? What did it do for your wife as you recovered? And we'd love to know the history of the ministry as well. Tell us why you're passionate about it.
Yeah, so the history-wise, Pure Life Alliance kind of birthed itself from Pure Desire years and years ago. There wasn't really anything on this side of Portland. Pure Desire is on the opposite side of Portland. I know they're more international, but that's where it is office-wise. And so a small church on this side of the west side of Portland decided to have a men's group, and so they kind of partnered with Pure Desire. They kind of launched it, and then they realized that it grew pretty quickly, but not just with the people in their church. It grew within other churches. And so pretty quickly they separated from being a church organization to being a nonprofit with the focus of networking churches and resources together around purity. So one of the things I love about Pure Life Alliance is the word alliance, is this concept that we're not the answer for everyone, but we are a answer, and we are partnering with churches. We are in partnership with churches. We're in partnership with counselors in order to offer a holistic view of healing for individuals who struggle with sexual addiction and their spouses who've been betrayed by them. So that's the overarching picture of Pure Life Alliance, and what it's done for me. Like I said, I was a twofer. I went into groups initially with the concept of, my wife wants me to go, so I'm going to go, and eventually stepped back. But when I re-engaged and I re-engaged with this desire to actually change, God really met me there. But He met me there not, with a voice from heaven saying, "You're magically changed." He met me there from individuals that were in the group with me who could speak into my life, and they were able to speak in my life because they've been where I was. They had some credibility that I was allowing them because I knew they had walked a similar path that I had walked, and that was very healing for me. The other thing that they did was they called me out. They recognized my BS when it was there. They's like, "Oh, nope, we've heard that before because we've said it, so that we're not accepting that." And that's super important for guys who are struggling with addiction. They need that pushback from guys who can say, "No, we recognize that lie. That's not truth." And so both are really important. And so through that journey and those guys, that's what led me to the healing that I have today and the relationship that I have with my wife. And so for me, this ministry is just very special. Anything that's going to help you heal, you're going to have a good heart for.
So how exactly does it work? Do I call it Pure Life Alliance? Do I call them up and say, where do I go? Do I call a church to see if they have it? Do I just show up at a group? Like, does it help women? Like, what type of programs do you offer? And who's essentially that target audience for Pure Life Alliance's services?
Yeah. So one thing is anybody who currently we're local to the Portland metro area. We're looking at branching out and launching some groups outside of this area and potentially getting to online groups. But right now we're local. And the individuals that we help, there are three main programs, if you will, that we offer. Two of them are full-fledged programs and the other one's more of an assessment program. And that's one for men who are struggling with unwanted sexual behaviors. And that can range anywhere from a pornography addiction to prostitution, acting out with strip clubs or same sex attraction. Any of those things fall under that umbrella of unwanted sexual behavior. It's a behavior that I am wanting to change. And that's one of our groups. It would be called Set Free, and our focus is being set free. And what I love about that phrase is the Bible says you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. But if you look at Eugene Peterson's version, it says you will experience the truth. And so it's not just about head knowledge, it's about actually experiencing truth from the other guys in your group. And that's what will set you free. So that's our Set Free program. Our other program is Hidden Hurt. We call it Hidden Hurt because oftentimes when the wife gets disclosed to, she feels like she can't share with anyone else. She has to hide this because it's her husband's issue and she doesn't want to hurt him or whatever. Maybe she does, I don't know. But the reality is she feels like she can't. That's not her story. And we want them to recognize that actually that's not something that we want. It may be a hidden hurt, but that it shouldn't be. There should be people that you can share with. And so that's for wives who have been betrayed, that betrayal trauma aspect. And it could be wives or spouses, fiancés. That's who that's for. And so that's who we help, and they can get connected with us through our website. They can get connected to us. Their church may have contact cards on their websites or in their church resource sections. But if they just go to our website and click on programs, they'll see men, women, and then the third one's couples. And that's an assessment base. So oftentimes we find when husbands and wives get healing, they get healing separate from each other. And so making that connection back together, it's not always easy. And so we've got this Rekindled program that helps them working together in order to kind of answer some of those questions. How do I re-engage? How do I get to where we want to be? And so we take them through an assessment process and then give them some resources that'll help them get from point A to point B.
How, thank you for sharing all that, Jeremy. That's awesome. Curious about how Pure Life Alliance handles confidentiality. I know a lot of times, men and women are hesitant to go into a group setting, especially if it's in person, maybe even at their own church, because they're worried about being spotted walking into that room by people who know them, etc. And also just sharing, like you were saying, hidden hurts. Maybe there's some shame there or some concern that the cat's going to get out of the bag before they're ready to disclose to friends and family, if ever. So, talk to us about confidentiality with your program.
Yeah, confidentiality is super important. And I like to say confidentiality has kind of two coins, or it's two sides of a similar coin. So we have a phrase, so we have a group guidelines that we have for both men and women. And in that, there's a whole section specifically on what confidentiality is and what it isn't. So if you're a part of a group, then we're going to ask that you not bring up anything that's in that group outside of that group with anyone, including your spouse, including, what is in that group stays in that group, with the exception of your own journey. So I'm not going to keep secret what I'm learning from my wife, but I am not going to tell my wife about somebody else in the group's journey. So confidentiality is super important. And I think that that's a very important thing early in the journey. The reason I said it's two sides to the coin is as we keep our stories confidential, we actually, how do I say this in a great way? I believe that when we are set free, when we have found freedom, that's our testimony. And I think we miss out on some of the grace that can be afforded to us by others by not sharing our stories. And oftentimes we don't share our stories because we're afraid of how someone else is going to respond to us. And yet, most often they'll respond with grace. So I'm not saying we should be shouting our stories from the mountaintop, but I do think we should be that God calls us to share our stories, that He works through them. So that level of confidentiality is the individual's choice, though. As a ministry, we're going to hold and protect their stories within the groups that they're in. And then we'll encourage them as they grow to be open handed with that so they can experience real grace.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about also as you're describing the programs. Uh, my husband and I were involved in trying to find group therapy for a loved one, a friend of ours that needed some help. And this person was just mortified at the thought of going into a group situation and exposing it. This was an unwanted sexual behavior situation, but still, I remember this is probably 10 years ago, thinking, what the heck? Why can't they just see someone one-on-one? Why is there all this group therapy? And now, having been in a group myself, I see the benefit. But you're the executive director of Pure Life Alliance, and I'd love to hear you address this issue with women who might be hesitant to go, share their story or air their dirty laundry, quote unquote, in front of strangers. What's the benefit of sharing your story or going through the healing process in a group setting?
Yeah. I think the number one answer to that is grace. And let me explain that. I believe there are three things that are needed in order for someone to heal, whether it's from betrayal or from sexual addiction, whatever it is. I think there are three aspects that are beneficial. Number one is God. Like, none of it can happen without God's design, without God's hand in it. And we get that through the church. We get that through our church community, being able to connected to a church that will help us remember that God is first and foremost above everything else. The second thing that is important is we need to work on ourselves, and we get that through counseling, through therapy, through coaching, where we need somebody who can help us understand the deeper issues. And you're not going to get that in a support group setting. So I would say that individual counseling is super important because you need to be able to work on some of those deeper issues that got you where you are. But the church is not equipped to deal with a lot of this right up front. And counselors, you're paying to be there. So even if I'm unloading with a counselor, the thought, especially for guys who struggle with sexual addiction and identity issues, is, well, I'm paying this person. Like, they have to like me. Like, it's like my dad. My dad loves me, but it's because he's my dad, right? Like, it's not really about me. When you step into a group and you are vulnerable, and the person across from you goes, man, I get it. That sucks. I'm so sorry. Like, I've been there. My husband's done that. I've been in that behavior before as a man. Like, there is something healing about seeing the grace that you receive from another individual that you don't get when you're not open with others.
Great answer.
I don't think you could have said it any better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was beautiful.
Jeremy, with that, as we close out today's podcast, do you have any words of encouragement that you might be able to give our listeners as they navigate the complexities of their own healing journey?
Yeah, I think since I'm talking, the majority of your audience is betrayed spouses. So I'm going to share some advice that my wife received, not from me, but from our pastor at the time. And that was move slow. There is no reason to rush any decisions. When you've been betrayed, there's some healing that has to happen. And there's a lot of things firing. And so just move slow. Take your time. Be thoughtful. Get the help that you need, the care that you need. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I agree. I think, well, I really wanted things to move faster because I was in pain, and I assumed that if they moved faster, then I'd move through the pain faster. Mm-hmm. But there is something to be said. I think as a massage therapist, I'm thinking these people who stretch out their muscles and they try to do it quickly without warming the tissue, or there used to be that, I don't know, do you remember back like in the 80s or 90s where they used to do the sort of the bouncing stretching? Do you remember that at all?
I do.
Okay,
yeah.
So, and now
well, we just dated ourselves.
Yeah. So, and they say, now, oh, don't do that. That can make little micro tears or whatever. And it's kind of the same thing in healing, that when we try to bounce forward and I feel like this analogy is really going south fast, so I'm going to try to salvage it. But in all seriousness, that, you know, when we try to do it too quickly, we can create more damage. So this is a place where we really try to press into self-regulation. Mm-hmm. Take a deep breath, do the exhale, allow yourself to experience give yourself permission to do that. Because I think often, in our effort to go fast, we miss some of the key components and the God experience that we can have in those key components when we try to move too quickly. Every season, every phase has a purpose, and every season and every phase has an important element of healing in it. So I think that was fantastic advice that she got.
And just tagging on what you were saying, I know personally I tried to outrun the pain or cover it over, throw confetti on it. Let's sprinkle that with some hot fudge. I don't know. I just like anything to not feel it. And something that you guys are both touching on is basically being comfortable to experience, like, you know, press into the pain, get curious about what's underneath it, do a little excavating there. Maybe there's a family of origin story or an unhealthy coping mechanism that God's wanting to undo and give you better tools, hand you better outcomes, and give you new experiences to undo and heal the damage from before. So taking time is the only way that's going to happen. Don't rush the process.
Yeah.
Well, and from a men's perspective on that side of the journey, for me, I had destroyed a lot in the relationship. And in my mind, I said, if I could just get back to here, then I'll be good. And so I very quickly went through healing. I mean, I did it well. I mean, I wasn't just skipping stuff, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna do this. And I got
check the boxes.
I got to one place, and then as soon as I got there, I was ready to get to the next place. And my therapist stopped me and he goes, dude, you just did a lot of really good work. Why don't you sit in this moment and enjoy what you've earned rather than rushing past it? And the other side of that is I realized I'm so glad I never got back to where I was.
Yeah.
Because where I was with my wife wasn't great.
Right.
I'm glad that by taking my time, I got so much farther.
Yeah. People always say, oh, I just want it to go back. I just want my life the way it was. And I'm like, do you really? Really?
Well,
I don't. I mean, I get what they're saying, but how about let's do it better? Let's go forward with new. Let's go forward with healed and with authenticity and vulnerability and these new tools that we have.
Our brains love what's familiar, and almost always our brain will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven.
Wow.
And so,
mic drop.
Well, I did see that on Instagram today. So, but it was a great reminder. It was a really great reminder that our brains really do love what is familiar, and so there's a reason why we want to go back to that place, Jeremy, that you said. But something that you and I, Kris, have talked about over the years is learning to be comfortable with pain. I'm comfortable with your discomfort. I'm comfortable with my own discomfort. And if we can learn to be comfortable with discomfort, we will have a significant advantage to navigating life and resilience in our life.
Yeah.
Good.
Well said. Yep. So there you have it, friends. If you or anyone you know is in need of finding a healing place, you're going to find links to Pure Life Alliance and the website where you can go and reach out to someone there online. Someone will contact you and get you processed, answer your questions, just put some loving arms around you and bring you in. So whether you are a betrayed spouse looking for help and support, some mentoring, a safe place to be heard, and to learn some new tools and gather community, they're going to do that for you. And they also have men's programs as well. So there's help for both you and your spouse at Pure Life Alliance. And we're excited for you and what God has in store. So we totally encourage you to reach out, be vulnerable, take the step. You really have nothing to lose and so much to gain.
Yes. And thank you for being here today with us, Jeremy. We really appreciate that you are willing to share your story and how your story has turned into something that you are using to help other people.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I pray that your podcast just keeps continuing to spread because you guys have so much good information.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's because of guests like you. Thanks.
And with that, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of our podcast community. Your support is valuable, and we're here to serve you. So remember that healing is a journey, not a destination. And as we navigate the path of recovery and transformation together, know that you are never alone. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep working toward your brighter, empowered future. Until next time, take care and keep embracing your journey of healing.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Betrayal Recovery Transformation Podcast with your hosts, Kris Rocha and Jenn Howie. We hope you've been helped and encouraged. If you value the content we shared today, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps others find the show. Need personalized guidance? Please contact Kris or Jenn for transformative coaching. This episode has been brought to you by HealingWithTheHowies.com, WatermarkCoach.com, and with the support of Pure Life Alliance Ministries.